Hey everyone, I'm Johan and this is Orson and you're watching Go Ahead and Make Me.
Go ahead and make me.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again for another episode of Go Ahead and Make Me. I hope you're happy and healthy and your loved ones are too, wherever you are. We're still in the middle of this pandemic over here. We're in lockdown number 6. The end doesn't seem to be in sight, but we try to keep optimistic. Now for today, I'm not going to give you a tutorial or even an outlined project for you to do, but I'm going to show you what you can do with a jelly roll. And of course a jelly roll is an X amount, usually I think it's 40 or 42 strips of fabric, usually matching fabrics that you can buy as a set like this. And I was given 2 of these. This one is a beautiful one with all kinds of batik fabrics. They're gorgeous colors. Now the other jelly roll that I was given by an old friend, yeah, it was a bit ugly, to be honest. Fortunately the friend agreed that it wasn't the nicest of jelly rolls, but I thought, as a challenge, what can I do with this jelly roll? And even though they're not my type of fabrics, can I make them look in a way that I find them acceptable or even pretty? Before we go on our jelly roll journey, I wanted to share something with you that I thought was quite amusing. You know how when you type something into Google, it will give you predictive text of the most asked questions of that particular subject. Well, I was looking for something about sewing, I forget what it was. And these were the predictive texts that I got. When you type in is sewing, then Google will give you these options. Is sewing hard? Well, it can be. Is sewing an expensive hobby? If you keep it simple, it's not, but it can be very expensive, as we all know. Is sewing a good hobby? I would say, yeah. Is sewing bee on BritBox? I don't know anything about BritBox, but apparently sewing bee is hard to find if you don't live in the UK. Is sewing machine a simple machine? No, it's actually a very complicated machine. Have you ever seen one from inside? It's very complicated. Is sewing a hobby? Is sewing a craft? Is sewing an art? Yes to all 3. The next thing I typed in was does sewing. With does sewing you get, does sewing thread go bad? And does sewing thread get old? I guess it would if you don't use it and you keep it forever, I don't know. Does sewing burn calories? I think it's safe to say that it doesn't. Unless you somehow manage to sew while you're on a bicycle or something. No, I would say the opposite is true because you sit on your ass a lot. Does sewing a wound hurt? I would say so, unless you would drink like a bottle of whiskey or something, maybe it'll ease the pain a little bit. Does sewing help your brain? Apparently it does. There's been studies. Yeah, it does help your brain. Does sewing affect pregnancy? I have no experience with that, but I don't think that it would. Maybe it would calm you down a little bit when you're not feeling too happy. I don't know. Does sewing count as art? Well, definitely. Does sewing save money? Only if you somehow are so good that you can sew things that will make you more money than you spend on the actual sewing, then it will make you money. Does sewing machine oil evaporate? I don't know. What are these? I don't know. The last question I asked was about YouTube sewing. And I'll just list them all for you. YouTube sewing projects, YouTube sewing for beginners, YouTube sewing with scraps, YouTube sewing machine, YouTube sewing videos, YouTube sewing channel, YouTube sewing bags, YouTube sewing projects for gifts, YouTube sewing tutorials, bags. Of course, the answer to all of those is go ahead and make me. So I'll be working with this jelly roll, and as you will see, the patterns on it are really quite strong. Let me just show you all the patterns together. So there, as you can see, they really are very strong patterns, very bright colors, and my first instinct was to tone it down, because I thought if I'm going to make something out of it, it's just going to look too over the top and too hysterical. And I thought, well, rather than tone it down, maybe I should actually go the other direction and emphasize all the strong colors and differences in patterns. And so I thought I'll just mix it up with some extra colors, with some extra solids. And as you can see, there's a lot of green in here happening. There's almost every pattern has green in it, so I thought I'll put some solid green in it as well. And then I also had this pink, which you can see, it's not the exact same pink, but it's very much in the same family. So I can add that to that. And I also thought, because there's also quite a few patterns with black, even here it has a little black flower, to introduce some major black as well, some black fabric. And I thought maybe the black fabric could be the sashing. Sashing being, of course, the bands of fabric that you would put in between blocks, which would also make the end result wider and higher. Yeah, so that's my plan, and I'm gonna cut all these up in uneven pieces. I'm not quite sure still if I'm gonna make 8-inch blocks or 10-inch blocks. So yeah, let's just start with cutting it up. Now the way I'm going to cut the fabric is going to be at random lengths. I'm using this ruler to line up the bottom of the fabric, and then I'll just choose random points to cut the fabric. These are almost square, but then I will say choose something a bit longer, and then something even longer. The whole point is to combine these lengths from different fabrics and then make them into blocks, so that none of the blocks are identical. I think that will make for a very playful quilt. See, these are all different lengths, and I will cut up the other ones as well. Now I've cut up a whole lot of pieces of fabric in different lengths. In jelly rolls, the width of all the strips is typically 2.5 inches, which gives you 2 inches in the middle that will be visible and 1/4 inch on each side as seam allowance. So we're going to be playing with 1/4 inch on each side of whatever we're making. So if it's a whole block that I'm making, then it has to have at least 1/4 inch for seam allowance. Now I've decided on making 8-inch blocks. So let's see, this is 8 inches. From here to here, that's 8 inches. So now I'm going to combine these into strips of 8 inches. Or I should say 8.5, because of course I'm allowing 1/4 inch on each side. So I'm just going to make new strips out of these strips. So now I made all these long strips. that I will then again cut into 8.5-inch strips so I can make blocks out of them. So the blocks that I made, they ended up looking like this. They're still quite busy, as you can see, but they will be interrupted by black lines, so that will give it a bit more structure. And I also thought, just to get away from strictly having just stripes, I thought I'd introduce a little bit of a design element, just to be a bit more playful. And that ended up looking like this. I'm very pleased with that. And you know, the contrasting colors. And they will just be sort of dotted throughout the end result. I'm not going for symmetry. It's going to be very playful. So this is what I'm working with. Now these black strips of fabric are going to go on either side of the blocks, also known as the sashing. And then I'll create strips of 5 blocks, 5 times 5, 25 blocks, so it's going to be a square thing. And then there'll be longer strips on the other sides of the blocks, so that each individual block will be completely surrounded by black. I think it'll look good, and let's find out. So this is the final result of the Jelly Roll project. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. It's about the size of a so-called lap quilt. I think it would look really good over a couch. It hasn't been quilted yet, but in a future episode, once it has been quilted, I will show you the final product. Yeah, I'm really pleased, and this whole thing was to show how a jelly roll made out of fabrics that you aren't particularly fond of, that it can actually turn into a project or this item that I really love it. I think it's one of the nicest things I've made, really.